Check, check, check.
There you go. Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Chinte, and I work at Benetech. Welcome to this session today. I just wanted to let you know about Slido, slido.com, #RightsCon. This is the platform that we're using to crowdsource questions during the session. So you can log in through here, ask questions, you can upvote questions, they'll appear live on the screen, and that'll help our moderator and panelists with answering your questions as we go along.
Yes, good. So thank you everybody for being here, and I'm very honored to moderate this panel with amazing women and friends. I want to thank Mariana Valente from Internet Lab that I had the honor to join the advisory board. It's a vibrant young Brazilian think tank, and they are doing amazing work. And part of one of the lines of work they do is regarding violence against women and how that is translated online, and how the debate is growing or not, and how the debate is characterized or not, and how the debate may actually get some difficult angles sometimes, and even some prejudice. So I think the objective of this panel, we have representatives here from different stakeholders, from government and civil society. I want to thank the presence of all of you guys here today. So how did we define violence against women here? Technologically related violence against women are acts of gender-based violence, either committed or aggravated by the use of ICT. So this is in the description of this panel. But we want to, with this panel and your help, because we also want to hear testimonies from the audience and what you face on your everyday and how your organization works with that, is to move beyond a feminist approach or a gender imbalance approach, and even beyond freedom of expression. So how should we be dealing with these issues today, and what is a framework that's valid? So that's why we're going to hear from this great panel here. We're going to start with Farhan Hussein from Bytes for All PAX 10. Then we're going to go to Mariana Valente from Internet Lab Brazil, Julio Uno from Internet Sem Frontiers Cameroon, Natalie from Charisma, also Natalie Espitia, who also helped to organize this panel, Betsy from the State Department here in the US. So please, let's go. And as we said, you can participate from the audience or also send questions through slido.com.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to start by giving you an introduction of what led to the research. And basically in late 2014, Bytes for All, an Association for Progressive Communications, published a country report on technology-driven gender-based violence. And the report presented a summary of 3 cases that we had identified, which talked about how offline violence transcends into the online sphere and vice versa, sort of expanding our understanding of how we look at violence. And these 3 cases were basically detailed case studies about 3 women who underwent severe violence, like countless other women, except that one thing that was common in all of the 3 women was that technology played a fundamental role in shaping the nature and intensity of violence that happened. So in the interest of time, I'll share only one case briefly, where a Karachi-based activist stood next to billboards that contained a lot of hate speech with quotations of scriptures, and they basically the people who put those billboards up were trying to create a link between how celebrating Valentine's Day is immoral and religiously, problematic. So what she did was that she just stood next to those billboards with another banner that said, come closer and let love happen. That is all. Her gesture was taken quite tolerantly by people looking at her campaigning and protesting this way. But within a day that it got reported by a local newspaper on their website, a massive Twitter trend started, and it lasted for 3 days, essentially alleging that she and the newspaper had committed blasphemy. So she and her colleagues received countless death threats and rape threats, and that forced them all to go offline for weeks. The men who were also involved in this campaign received abuse also, except that it was not as violent or sexual in nature. Rather, the only sexualized violence that the men received was, about their mothers and sisters. So that was sort of the contrast there. So while the newspaper took down the reporting of her protest, quite soon, and they published an apology, the woman was watched for 2 years. And after 2 years, she was shot to death. Her mother was with her, and she also got injured. The other person who was with her at that time was her driver, who survived that day, but a couple of months later, they also shot him because he was an eyewitness. So, this is just one story, but it shows how the harms that come from online incitement of violence and the forwarding of violence, especially when gender is at play, seems to exceed those that come from traditional forms or traditional understanding of what violence against women is. So, moving on, there's a very long discussion and a set of observations that can be made about this, but I want to focus on one aspect that is often left out of conversations such as these, and it is the blaming and the resultant regulation of technology instead of behaviors in online spaces. And to conclude my point here is that an important solution may lie in making corporate intermediaries more responsible in understanding how human rights get trampled in online spaces and how violence spreads uncontrollably through digital mediums, as opposed to how, people say that governments should be handed over this right to take control of technology and regulate it, because governments may not be the best control centers in dealing with gender-based violence, given their track record in dealing with any kind of human rights violations, let alone understanding of technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and I have tweeted the report. They have written on a series of cases involving violence against women. Some of the descriptions are incredibly shocking, but I think we have the responsibility to learn more about those cases and then see and understand how they get also translated to other countries. Thank you for that, and moving on, Mariana, I pass the word to you. Mariana is going to present a little bit on the research that she has led in Brazil with Internet Lab and some of those conclusions, checking the case law in Brazil regarding ICT-related violence against women. And go ahead, please.
Okay. So thank you very much, Carol. Thank you for Hannah. I'm very happy that you made this presentation because I'm going to speak more panoramically. We are finishing analyzing the results of a research that we've been developing in the past 15 months, funded by the Ford Foundation. We're about to publish the results. So I'm going to give more like panoramic views about cases of non-consensual intimate images and violence against women in that sense. So I'm really glad that you gave like a specific case because I'm going to speak more about like numbers. So we developed this research about what's commonly referred to as revenge porn. Many people are starting to try to find other names to better name this sort of violence, like non-consensual intimate images. And basically what we did in this research was mapping all the judicial decisions in the Court of Appeals of the state of São Paulo in Brazil relating to breaching intimacy and privacy of women online. And just to, maybe it's important to point out it's the biggest Court of Appeals of Brazil with this problem. Not only how they develop, but the answer that law gives to it. I think the main problem about this method is that you end up not getting the cases that do not go to the judiciary, and especially to the Court of Appeals, but we try to bridge that problem by making several interviews, especially with law enforcement agencies. So just a few results about that research. I think the numbers that we got, 95 decisions, and also the sort of lawsuits that we ended up finding in the Court of Appeals of São Paulo, show us that the problem is more widespread than we had imagined at first. And not only that it's more widespread, but it develops differently than we were imagining at first, especially because of the very high number of cases that didn't involve specifically the spreading of intimate images, but that had to do with extortion, menacing, or even rape related to possessing intimate images. And that sort of shows that this is a problem that doesn't happen only online. And that maybe the approach, and that they are related for her, maybe the approach that only looks to this problem as if it was an online problem is a mistake, because we're talking of cases in which someone possesses an intimate images and uses that to obtain other advantages, but that never necessarily goes online, but it has everything to do with the phenomenon that we're describing. So it's especially unhelpful to frame that into like an online sort of violence only. The second observation I have from those results is that it seems to us, out of reading all these 95 decisions, that the victim strategies is also not we had envisioned at first. So we were really thinking that the strategies would be about criminalizing, and that's not the case. I mean, out of 95 cases, we got 36 that were criminal cases, but 59 were civil. And out of these 59, 43 were directed to OSPs. They were lawsuits requiring the removal of contents. And out of those results, and also out of the interviews we made, especially with lawyers that have been defending these sort of victims, we came to the conclusion that it seems that what victims are most interested in is just having the content removed, not necessarily going to the second step of punishing, especially because that involves a lot of more victimization. We can speak about that later. One third observation is that the problem is clearly worse when it comes to images of teenagers. We have a very protective law in Brazil that's called teenagers were favorable to the aggressor, which was not the case when we were analyzing cases involving adults. And that happened because the way this law frames the issue of intimacy as child pornography is very strict, so it's very easy to fall out of that description. And also because when the judge understands that the aggression didn't know that the person was under 18 years old, it's very easy that the lawsuit gets dismissed. And consent doesn't play a role because it is understood that it shouldn't even play a role in these cases. I mean, even just the act of possessing images should be a problem. So in the end, if the aggressor didn't know or didn't have reasons to know that the victim was under 18, the victim is unprotected by our law. And that can be extremely problematic because when we're speaking about teenagers, we're speaking of the most striking consequences. We have been following several cases of school dropouts, people having to move from their neighborhoods, move from their families because of having those sort of images being exposed. And the fourth and last observation I have about these results is that it seems to us that the judiciary is looking at this problem strictly from an individual standpoint. And that maybe comes from even the very structure of criminalization, of thinking of law only in terms of criminalization. Because when you think of violence strictly as crime, you have to frame the problem within the framework of having an aggressor and having a victim. And you can't really see that this is a social problem. So all lawsuits regarding adult women, they will be lawsuits of crimes against reputation. So that's thought in a strictly individual way. And even though out of the 95 cases, 93 were related to women, not in one decision did a judge say the word gender or say that it was a gender problem or there were gender norms involved. So the problems were always described as a problem with reputation. I mean, gender norms, yes, honor. And gender norms were not brought to the discussion at all. And just a last remark about this, we have a very... I think we have a very interesting law in Brazil to protect women against domestic violence. And it's very interesting in the sense that it deals with public policy and establishing a network of protection, not only thinking of violence in terms of criminalization, but it hasn't been mobilized in the Brazilian judiciary. So that's something maybe for us to discuss, why are we thinking of this problem only in terms of individualizing and of trying to individualize conduct? And the criminalization strategy is maybe the reason for that. So that's it for now.
Thank you, Mariana. I think those are very insightful conversations and thoughts on the role of the government in advancing these rights and even public policies in a broader scale. So talking about government, I want to bring to Julie Ono from Internet Sans Frontiers, and it was very interesting when we were discussing the panel that he said, as usual in the African continent, we see this gap on the discussion and framework between the government action and the citizens' initiative. So let's listen from Julie.
Yes, thank you very much, Carolina. I will echo what was said by our friend from Pakistan and by Mariana a bit earlier. In the case of So, in the African context, and specifically Central African, because Internet Sans Frontières, so Internet Without Borders in English, conducted a study on women's rights online in Cameroon, and and we figured out finally that Internet is a great mirror of inequalities and social issues that exist in our world. But that dimension is not taken into account by our governments, African governments. For instance, in the case of Cameroon, there is an ICT law that represses pedopornography and even same-sex solicitations through ICT, which gives an idea of priorities of the government, but nothing on gender-based violence. And this is surprising because we've conducted a quantitative study among women, and we saw that despite the fact that women are a bit less connected than men, they are the most likely to be victims of gender-based violence, at least violent speeches, being called, names, etc. And on this, I have an example, a very recent example, still Cameroonian. I don't know if some of you know the famous football player, soccer player, Samuel Eto'o. He's a super international star and is accused of revenge porn against one of his mistresses. And the mistress, ex-mistress, published a book called Revenge Porn, and she was the one being called names. Like she's the one being the slut. She was the one being, doing something wrong. So it's quite interesting. And what's interesting is that many of these messages of violent messages came from women, and that I found very preoccupying. And to echo to a question that was asked, whether it's a man issue, not that much. I think it's really a social issue and a question of education. Many women have interiorized the idea that, they're not entitled to certain things, and that, the patriarchy is the norm. And I think that's something that's probably should be stressed on when dealing with gender-based violence and how to fight against it. Yes, on this specific issue, we've seen that despite the fact that most governments do not take actions, there are civil society that are resilient and quite creative, as it is quite often the case in Africa. And I want to give an example of a platform called Pigasimu, which is in Lingala means denounce, if I remember well. Lingala being a language spoken in DRC. It's a platform. What's interesting is that it's a platform that uses a technology called Freedom Phone, which allows you to create campaigns via SMS and to target the population that you'd like to target. And they put that in place, and they send SMSs to women on what's gender-based violence and why it's not. I mean, why it's wrong, why they are not the ones being wrong, but the one who perpetrates them. And what's also interesting is that they have a hotline behind this also to receive calls and, women who want to denounce what they've been victim of. And I think that's interesting because first it's an Afrofeminist initiative, and I'm insisting on the word because I think feminism has to take into account specificities, cultural specificities. And in the case of Africa, the education is really, really important. The education on the fact that the simple fact that women are entitled to rights, that's something that many still don't take for granted. So it's an Afrofeminist initiative by a collective called Mwasi, and I think it's probably something that could be adapted elsewhere. And I wanted to highlight it here because, again, it proves that civil society can be at the forefront of understanding current issues and probably suggest perspective on these type of issues. And yes, I hope we'll have the time to showcase other interesting examples.
Broadening up a little bit the framework and the narrative, right? I want to also bring to the table the issue of economic growth and development. There are so many statistics already out there that proves that even rudimentary skills of ICT for women contribute to local development. The statistics are just going up and up and up and up in terms of the important role of women in rural communities and other communities that possesses the cell phone or that possesses a rudimentary computer, and how that's important. And I think you guys are all bringing the importance of this sustainable environment and of supportive environment for that. So with that in mind, I wanna bring Natalie Espia from Fundación Carisma from Colombia. She will present on exactly a supporting system project that is the Alerta Machitrol project and its background and how the results have been so far. So Natalie, please.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Well, I'm here to present Alerta Machitrol. It's a campaign. It's not a resource. You're all talking about resource.
Yeah.
But Alerta Machitrol was born for a research that we did together with Web Foundation. So we started to do a joint project with them, and realizing there was a wide and complex matter talking about online violence. We want to focus there on online violence against journalists. And we started to work on that, but when we was time to talk about take action, we decided to do a campaign that was focused on public in general. So Alerta Machitrol is called like that because we wanted to play it with two words that are really familiar in Latin America and here. You all know what is a troll, right? And in Latin America, we use macho to name, and here you're probably familiar with that, to name a guy that thinks that he's the strongest one and the one who can do everything. So we want to put
That's
those...
a nice way to put it.
Yes, that's a nice way to put it, yes. So we want to play with that because all Alerta Machitrol is a campaign that's based on humor. We want to play with that. And it's a counter-speech campaign. That's really important to say. So we put those two words together and we named it Alerta Machitrol. So Alerta Machitrol is a campaign that wants to visualize online violence against women. Okay. So we were trying to play with the idea that we were investigating a new species that is growing on internet. There is the machitrol. So that's why you see a scientist doing that. Sorry, it's not working. Okay. So we're saying that finding a machitrol is really easy. You just have to go online, and then you can find a wide types of machitrol. But we want to focus on two. You can next one, please. So we put it only two machitrols, the uncurable and the curable. So the curable one is the one that you can talk and you can have a conversation and say, maybe what you're saying is kind of sexist or is misogyny. So we can have a conversation about that. But the uncurable one is the one that has nothing to do. You just say, okay, this guy is just lost in this war and we cannot do anything for that guy. But our campaign is not focused on sending a message to those kind of people, but we realize that not only men do that. Women can be a machitrol too. But we're not focused on sending a message to that, but we are focused on sending a message to the person that is being a victim of online violence, because we want them to know, because we realize that young people don't, and women a lot of times don't realize they are being victims of online violence, because sometimes we naturalize those messages online with a lot of memes. You know what is a meme? Yes. So it's important to say that we're not focused on that. We're focused on sending a counter message. So that's why we are a campaign of counter speech, because what we want to do is use humor to spread the word and to produce a lot of content that is saying, okay, this is wrong. This message going through the internet is not okay. It's sexist. Is going against women. Is going against our rights. So let's put something really creative, something that we can play with, something that we can have fun with, and use it to talk about this problem that's taking the online war. So how Alerta Machitrol works is, this is the slide. We had two seals, the incurable one and the curable one. So what you do is to do a screenshot, a print of the messages. You can use a message on Facebook, Twitter, whatever social network that you're using, Instagram, or you can maybe do a print of a comment on a media news. We don't accept an email or WhatsApp messages, because that's private. We only use the one that are on public. And you took the print and you put the seal that you choose. You can choose between the uncurable and the curable one, and you have to explain to us why you think that message is sexist or is doing online violence against women. And then you upload it to the internet, and you can use it to put it on Twitter or on Facebook. So you can say, okay, I had fun machitrol online. So this is the machitrol. Well, it's really. Can you change the one, please? So we had some examples here. This one is a news, and they're doing. You see the seal there, and they say my stores had a great success because I don't hire fat women or ugly people. No.
And
just because I had beautiful people coming, so they put the seal there, and we had another one. And this is really recent. This is all the day we commemorate Women's Day, and they say it turns out that now they don't want flowers, they want rights. Who gets them? So they put the seal there. And the people will put the link or where we can find that, so like the source, and then they explain why it is a machitrol. So you can find this tool, because this is more a tool, but you can find resources at our website. You can find resources to go to how to handle that, no? Because we are doing this as a counter speech, but we want to put resource for women or for LGBTIQ people to use it too, because we realize this is a problem against women, but against to LGBT people too. So you can find it in actua.charisma.org.co/
here.
Alerta Machitrol. So, or you can just Google Alerta Machitrol or put the hashtag on Twitter or Facebook. I think that's it, and we can have a discussion.
I think it's a wonderful way to do even a shaming campaign.
Totally.
To deal and raise awareness and engage with people you can engage. But moving forward to my dear Betsy, she has been working with human rights forever, and now she's at the State Department working in the Office of Global Women Issue. So she's gonna tell us a little bit what are the battles she's facing nowadays there. Go ahead, please.
Hi, folks. My name is Betsy Brayman, and like Carolina said, I work with the Office of Global Women's Issues at the State Department, and have been working on internet freedom with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor for many years as well. So I have been enmeshed with the issues of gender and freedom of expression and digital security and all of these different issues facing international human rights activists around the world for many years. Just to give you a quick overview, the office that I work for now is really focused on making sure that the perspectives and the understanding of the experiences of women, girls, and LGBT people are very well integrated into U.S. foreign policy. And these are issues that are cross-cutting and also very highly prioritized by President Obama and the current administration when it comes to really making sure that we understand how a gender-based violence lens really fits across a lot of the different issues that we're facing within foreign policy today. And so our office is really focused on helping the rest of the State Department understand and integrate that, and also doing our own diplomatic policy outreach and funding programs and things like this to support those efforts. So today it's really wonderful to be here with this group of activists who are really fighting the good fight locally, providing such amazing examples of how people are creatively engaging, capturing, reporting, and raising awareness about these issues. And as we can see, it's more than just about, technology is more than just access. Access is a really complicated thing when it comes to the rights of women and LGBTI people in particular. And when we talk about freedom of expression online, we have to examine whose freedom of expression. Because the current paradigm that we've been dealing with when it comes to freedom of expression online is a privileged paradigm. It has not been including the voices and the experiences of women, girls, LGBTI people, and other groups that are outside of dominant power structures. So we have the opportunity to help evolve that paradigm. And these are people, and you all in this room are a big part of that solution. It makes things more complicated. It makes things harder. But in the end, it's going to be a more inclusive way of understanding and using the internet so that we are able to scale equality instead of inequality, the way that we're kind of facing right now. So there are just a couple things I want to mention here in terms of the ways that our office is thinking about how to conceptualize tech, the internet, and gender. So first of all, a rights-based framing is really important. Gender-based violence online isn't just about freedom of expression. It's about assembly. It's about association. It's about civil rights and political rights and cultural rights. It's about access to justice. So we have to really think about how also that gender-based violence isn't just about women, of course. Gender is all-inclusive. Men have a gender too, and patriarchy hurts everybody. In the short term, it favors men in a lot of ways, but in the long term, it really holds us all back. So a broader rights-based framing is really key to thinking about how do we engage on gender, tech, and online harassment. As we've talked about today, it's really important for us to understand how the online and the offline transcend and inform each other. So that's really key. Another thing that's related to that is the cross-pollination between social movements. The freedom of expression, internet freedom world can sometimes get a bit insular, right? And in order for us to really expand and help other folks working on really important issues around the world to understand, how to be secure online and how these issues about privacy and security are really relevant to their work, we have to move out of these silos, right? So, have the privacy geeks and the anarchist hackers meet the radical feminists, meet the AIDS health workers, meet the abortion providers, the Black Lives Matter protesters, people who are leading tenant associations, working on fair housing. We talked a little bit about economic participation and how that's really important. People who are focused on, sexual and reproductive health and rights. There are so many intersections between these different movements. And if we're going to be able to really move forward in terms of making sure that we're able to have a lot of solidarity and power together as we kind of reshape this paradigm that we're working in, we have to do that together. Along with that, there are all these diverse actors. You have families, you have community and local responses, which we've heard a lot about today that are really, really impressive. Local content and language is really important. Civil society, of course, doing local advocacy, research, the things that we're hearing about today. And then government. Government has a lot of responsibility as well. Talk about law enforcement training, the implementation of laws. I like how you mentioned how the domestic violence laws in Brazil haven't quite yet been harnessed to deal with this issue. That's something that we're facing today. There are some really amazing, very strong domestic violence movements in the United States that have been doing some really important work around online safety. Kind of getting these different movements to talk to each other and work together is really key. And then, of course, business. We have to figure out how to engage businesses better and move that conversation to the next level. And there's a lot of really goodwill in that space. We just have to really problem solve together. So the other really key thing that I'll mention is making sure that within these conversations, we preserve agency and we nix protectionism. That's really, really important when we think about how to frame on gender-based violence online and moving this conversation forward. Because the protectionist argument is often exploited by the repressive governments who want to use the excuses of child porn, moralistic arguments to broadly interpret that for their own political purposes. So those are some general kind of guidelines within our framing that we're using as we think about how to move this conversation forward.
A great contribution on creative ways to actually break silos that exist and then expand this framework has, I think it's the core goal of this panel here with the contribution of each of you. And I think, so now we have around 25 minutes until the end of the panel, and the idea now is to have a ping pong between the audience and the panel. So I have a couple of questions that we discussed, and then I want to be sure that you guys bring some questions too and experiences, and then we go online. So let's see if we can do this three bodies problem type of thing here. So from the online, I think there is something that's really relevant nowadays. So given the gender ratio and developer circles of times, how can women in tech best advocate when doing so can make them internally targeted or othered? I don't even know what's that. How do we deal with gender-based violence in our field? And I think this has been more and more and more present in some of the discussions also in US and in other fields where targeting women became in US, there was a couple of months ago a big scandal in Nature Bionetworks, and also I think there was something in Uber and and so many other examples that are related to that. So I think let's go to that, what we live in our tech policy field, and then grasping from what Betsy was saying, what sort of civil society, private sector projects and partnerships have you heard of, or that we should be developing, that exist and do not exist and should exist? So anybody, please jump in. Gender in the field. So let's get a question from the audience, and then we can move on from those questions or comments, experiences. Here, can we give that to her? It's not on.
Hi, my name is Chennai Chin. I'm from Research ICT Africa, based in Cape Town. And I've come from Gender and Internet Governance Exchange from Africa, hosted by APC. And my question is around, I posted it, but I just want for the panelists to respond to this. How do we engage users who are offline but are victims of gender-based violence? For example, you have women having their bad pictures being used as memes, but they're not online. And yet it's circulated, and yet their friends tell them, oh no, go on Facebook, your photo is there. But they don't have an account, and they choose not to have an account. So what are from your different country perspectives, how do you outreach to those women and men? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Okay, so Mariana?
I'd like to comment a bit on that, and also try to frame what you've been speaking of, and put something. I was talking about Furhan about something about this just before starting. I think it's interesting to put into that framework. I think it's really interesting that we have a project of counter speech here, because that's definitely one of the strategies to deal with online violence. And at the same time, I think it becomes pretty clear that it's a limited strategy. I mean, there are cases of a lot of success. I think you're presenting one that's very interesting, using humor. We have a few cases of success in Brazil too, like big campaigns that have really been able to turn the story in favor of the person who had been the victim. And I think there are limits, either when, if we're speaking of situations that are going on offline, as you're putting, or because the very structure of the society doesn't allow for the discourse to be overturned. So maybe I'd leave to that, and also give the floor to Furhan, who was saying some really interesting things about this before we started.
Yes, thanks. So we were having this discussion about how, what are the different solutions that could be out there to counter online hate speech. And one which was being discussed was countering online hate speech with more speech. In our context, yes, exactly what you were discussing. In our context, however, we have seen that at times it may not always work the way it is intended. For instance, in online spaces, you see that saner voices, people who support human rights, activists or civil society representatives, always tend to be outnumbered when it comes to, addressing these issues, trying to, speak out with people who are being abusive. And in one particular case, cyber armies and cyber trolls that are out there sort of form alliances to go and target people, and it can be very hard, especially, and in our region we've seen that it's very easy to associate anything with blasphemy or religion, and the moment that happens, all hell breaks loose, and it's the immediate safety of the person that comes at threat, such as the instance that was discussed a while ago in the case of the activist who was murdered. So for her, going low profile immediately while waiting for justice was the only option, which is terrible that, she had to absolutely sever her online presence. But even that did not really work to her benefit. So yeah, it's a big question mark, and it's something that needs to be understood better. But again, I would still focus on the role of corporate intermediaries as being one that is extremely important, because you see, corporations generate a lot of profit from the data that they gather from us and sell to people, and they get away with it very easily, while taking no responsibility of the harms and the violence, the human rights abuses that also happen on the same mediums. And there's just so much more that they can do in this context, which is why that needs to be debated a lot more.
And I think this tied with the question from the audience, from our colleague from Cape Town, because exactly if they are not online, but their information is being used online, how to do it and how we should be asking help from, right? So it would be great if we have anybody from Google, Facebook, or other platforms in the audience to tell us how they deal with it online. But maybe have some boards, even with users, so we don't move to paternalistic solutions like actually happened in Brazil before Marco Civil, when there were a lot of laws criminalizing some actions instead of building a supportive environment. Natalie, you want to comment?
Yeah, I want to say that we actually taking Alerta Machitrol in a place that is going offline to talk about the campaign offline. So we're doing some radio shows at the street, because I'm not only an activist that works with digital rights. I also work doing some cultural stuff. So we mix both it, and we are going to streets, Bogota, Cali, Medellin, and talking about this campaign so people realize when they're being a victim. And they're saying, okay, maybe I'm not online, but we can create a support group of people that is actually online and can help take down that kind of comments. Or support group also can help you, giving you tips and tools and web page that you can use to how to handle that kind of things. So, and doing the prints for Alerta Machitrol is very important when you do the prints, and you can capture that thing and you can save it, because that's the proof that you are being a victim, and you can use it later.
Always take a print screen, people.
And to comment on your question, I think the way to fight against GBV is to go where, to target offline persons, is to go where they are. And on the African continent, what do they use? They use mobile phones. Even in the remote areas, you have mobile networks. And I think organizing campaigns such as the Pigasimu example that I gave, there are many others, certainly, is interesting, because, yes, it adapts to the market you're talking. It's not a market. It adapts to the people you're talking to. And it also raises another question, which is not directly linked to this debate, which is how to protect data of people in Africa. And that's another debate that we'll probably have this afternoon. But yes, we need to go where the persons are. And I think there was a question on free speech. How to fight against GBV and at the same time protect free speech. What interpretation of free speech? It depends what interpretation of free speech you have. Of course, there is always the dichotomy between the US interpretation, which is, okay, you can basically almost say whatever you want, and the civil law system, which says you can do whatever you want until someone else's liberty is affected. And someone else's liberty can start very, very, like the next door. So first, we need to agree what interpretation we give to free speech. And I think that's probably a challenge that we've been having online for certain.
Betsy, and then back to the audience.
I guess I would just note that it's important for us, as we've been talking about today, about how the online and the offline inform each other, for us to not have assumptions that we have to create new things in order to address online violence. So sometimes I think what's really important is to, like, there's a lot of education and awareness and training that has to happen with the infrastructure that's already there, the law enforcement, the service providers that are already there, the different kind of activists that are already on the ground, to help them understand how this intersects with them and how they can adapt and evolve their work in order to include this online experience.
Harnessing and breaking silos that we were discussing. So just a question for the audience. Who here has suffered online violence? Please raise your hands. Have you? So just repeating the question, because this side has not. So who has suffered online violence? Who knows who has suffered online violence? Okay, thank you. So this is very present on our day-by-day life, right? So I would love to hear some testimonies if you are willing to. But Leslie, please, a question for you. Here, all right.
So,
introduce yourself.
yes. So I spent most of my career doing free expression, and I'm furious because I think that we have this framed wrong. We've got it somehow framed as free expression for the trolls versus all kinds of power-sapping things about women, where, you're abused, where we're using all this language, and we're not. It seems to me that if you're going to talk about rights, we have to talk about our rights. And free expression, the ability to have an equal voice online, is sort of at the heart of this, separate from the kinds of cases that get offline or specifically about reputation. And I feel like we really have to take free expression back. I mean, even in the United States, maybe you can say anything under the Constitution, but the platforms have wide power and do limit all kinds of speech that would be, quote, constitutional. But I think that somehow we give up our power if we only talk about this as victimization, and instead of that, there is sort of our right and our power to participate in a medium that we need for our work, for our families, for our education. So I think we have to be more assertive about the right side of this. In the United States, it's always free expression versus privacy, and it's not entirely clear to me, except for revenge porn, why this is privacy. I mean, we're being pushed offline, and I just think it's more powerful language, and we really have to talk about our voice, that we deserve to hold half the internet, and get a bit more aggressive about that.
Thank you very much. I think this is exactly, it's a great frame for exactly what are the goals of these organizations working here. And Mariana, you want to comment on that?
Yes, I wanted to make a quick comment sharing a case that we have been following closely. It's the case of a journalist who wrote a piece about sexism in the nerd environment. And she started receiving a lot of threats online, and some masculinist groups, they found out her address, and they started to send things to her address, to her neighbors, and she felt really threatened because they were also sending threats to her family in her own house. And she did a great job at exposing the situation because she was an outspoken journalist, and she wrote a few texts about it, a few articles.
She took the risk.
She took, but at the same time, when she speaks about it, she says, every time I think of writing about sexism again, I think twice.
Yes.
Because...
Self-censorship.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe that's a good framing for the issue of free speech. And just catching up really quick on what Betsy was saying before about networks of activists and things that are going on offline, education initiatives. One thing that we also noticed from our research, we developed a case study in the periphery of São Paulo with teenagers that were being exposed in slut-shaming lists, and girls were also going offline because of what was happening to them. We started to investigate the network of support that they had. And we're speaking of a very poor neighborhood in the periphery of São Paulo, in which the presence of the state is mainly schools and a few health community agents.
And heavily armed.
Heavily armed police, and that are mingled with drug trafficking and all sorts of problems that you can imagine. And the teachers in the schools weren't being very supportive of the situations. When we would speak to them, they would be just like blaming the victim and all that. And sometimes it seems to me that we have to look at at places we didn't suspect before when speaking about these subjects. So one of the places we should look at, it seems to me, in Brazil, is the discussion about education plans. And this has been very polemic in Brazil lately because we have a very, very conservative Congress. And we always used to have inside our educational plans these gender and human rights issues, which have been taken out by the last legislature. So maybe that's a place where this should be discussed, like what should be discussed in schools with these teenagers, with these children, because I think there are several setbacks there, and if that's the presence of state in many places, maybe that's where we should also try to go in through.
And so I think we are all bringing different strategies here, right? There is this bottom-up approach at the community level, but there is this top-down approach from governments and even international organizations, which is something we haven't touched much, but I would love to hear from you guys and from the audience. I'm not seeing anybody from UN or UNESCO here. I know they are here in RightsCon. Because the government set a goal with the Sustainable Development Goals and the WICIS +10 results to bring online 1.5 billion people in less than 10 years. How are we bringing these people online if they arrive online and their image and private and data has already been shamed? Are we going to spread the horrible right to be forgotten style to protect these people, right? Which is like a horrible solution. So I'm not supporting that. I'm just kind of thinking about the collateral effects, the chilling effects of a bad discussion, of if this takes a bad turn. So I think one thing that have appeared here as example is the power of the online community has an immune system, right? If the person is not present, can we, as a community, react to something as an immune system? So again, that's another suggestion. I see a hand over there, and I think we have 5 minutes to close the panel. So if you have a question, it's your turn. Okay, you and then you. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Charlie Hale. I'm from Pinterest. You had asked a question before about platforms and what they do, and I think this actually goes to your current point about governments. I think oftentimes there isn't certainty from governments around these issues, and so I think revenge porn or non-consensual intimate imagery is a good example. In California, there were, millions of dollars being made by sites that trafficked these types of images, and there was no law until recently to give platforms like us the certainty that we needed to know that that was an illegal act. And so I think in the void around different issues like this, platforms sometimes just have to act. We had kind of banned that kind of imagery on Pinterest a long time ago, a couple of years ago. A lot of platforms that came from Google, which is a little bit more of a kind of free expression, although I also dislike that dichotomy, where they would want kind of verification that the victim writing in was actually the person in those photos, and we just felt like it didn't really matter because we just don't want, as you said, if we're trying to get another 1.5 billion people online, we have to create the environment that's safe and inclusive and comfortable. So more of just a comment, but wanted to answer your question.
Yeah, so here, and then her. So.
Hi, my name is Sude. I'm Iranian, feminist cyber activist based in Paris. Well, I have different questions for you because we created this Macho Land platform. You might know the name Macho and Land, what it means. We named this platform Macho Land because we want to occupy Macho Land, as we would like to occupy Wall Street too. So I have this question for you. What we basically do is very similar to what you do with the Alerta Macho troll. But do you see any changes? Like, do those macho trolls stop being sexist? Do you see any changes in there? behavior, because what basically we do, we send emails or we send tweets or Facebook messages to that responsible person. That could be a legal person like VOA, BBC, or some personality directly, and we make them to answer us. We actually do spam their emails until they get to answer us and say, sorry, we didn't know that was sexist. We also have that a website is already filtered in Iran, of course, but we also were considered about this sexual harassment among the applications like Telegram and Viber and so on. As you know, like Viber creates some stickers, and those stickers were highly sexist, like in the Iranian sphere. And when we wanted to offer them some feminist stickers or not sexist stickers, they did not accept us. And the Iranian government could actually ban some activists like me, so I cannot have access to Viber on any IP, my name, anything. So I do not exist on Viber anymore because I had this problem. But then on Telegram, we did create a bunch of dozens of stickers against the sexual harassment to say, stop it right now, I don't want it, etc. And that did really work. I mean, just this shaming project is a very good one, but do you also get to make them change their behaviors in their next less sexist behaviors?
Thank you, and I think that ties greatly to a question that we have online. Why is this violence only has a women's issue and not a gender threat to a border free of expression? But there was also another question there before, that this should be a man issue too. And it's very funny. In my family, we have this very clear, right? My husband is also in tech policy, and he's the one that do the early pickups and take my son to the circles with his school. Why? Because he's praised as an amazing, wonderful father by everybody around him, while I say, you're going to do the pickup and I'm going to stay late in the work, you know? And because if I leave early, not in my organization right now, but public knowledge, very flexible on that, but in general, people look bad at you, right? When you leave a panel in the middle of the panel because you need to pick up children. So that needs to be a man issue too. We need our partners and our friends to buy into this. And because they will be praised and their salaries will not be smaller. So you have a question there too.
Yeah, hi, my name is Tanmori, and I work on issues of Dalit rights and Adivasi rights in India. And one of the questions I had in terms of strategies had to do with, are there any tools that are being developed or any reports that are being done to not just document the harassment, but to document the perpetrators?